Some people feel their body relax the moment the world grows quieter, not because they dislike sound itself, but because silence allows something inside them to settle. While noise fades into the background for many, for others it presses forward, demanding attention even when nothing meaningful is being said. This difference is rarely about personality or preference alone. It reflects how the mind and nervous system process incoming information. Choosing silence over noise is not about withdrawal from life. It is often about creating the conditions where perception, thought, and emotion can function without strain. To understand this pattern, it helps to listen not to what people say they prefer, but to how their system responds. Sensory processing thresholds and environmental impact. People who prefer silence often have lower thresholds for sensory input. Sounds do not arrive as neutral background texture. They arrive as signals that must be registered, sorted, and filtered. This happens automatically, without effort, until the system reaches saturation. In noisy environments, attention becomes scattered. The mind works harder to maintain coherence, even if the person appears calm. Over time, this constant processing creates fatigue that is difficult to explain in words. Silence reduces the volume of incoming data. It allows perception to organize itself naturally, without competing layers. What looks like sensitivity is often precision operating near its limit. Silence as a condition for cognitive clarity. For many people, thinking improves when sound decreases. Thoughts lengthen, connections deepen, and ideas are allowed to remain unfinished without pressure. Noise interrupts this process, not always consciously, but rhythmically. In louder environments, the mind shifts toward short responses and surface-level engagement. This works well for quick exchange, but poorly for reflection. Silence restores a slower tempo where complexity can be held without urgency. This is why silence feels productive even when nothing is produced. Clarity here is not about output. It is about mental space becoming usable again. Noise as intrusion rather than stimulation. Noise is often described as energizing, but for some, it feels invasive. Sudden sounds, overlapping voices, or constant background noise enter awareness without invitation. The body responds with subtle tension, even when the mind tries to ignore it. Unlike stimulation that can be chosen, noise removes control over attention. It interrupts inner continuity and fragments emotional presence. Preferring silence, then, is not a rejection of experience. It is a way of preserving coherence. What others experience as lively input, these individuals experience as disruption that never fully resolves. Emotional regulation through reduced external input. For people who prefer silence, emotional balance is closely tied to the amount of input entering the system. Sound does not only carry information, it carries mood, urgency, and emotional tone. Even neutral noise creates a low level of activation that the body must manage. When sound decreases, emotional signals become easier to interpret. Feelings are no longer competing with external rhythm. Subtle states that were previously masked begin to surface with clarity rather than intensity. Silence functions here as emotional regulation, not avoidance. It gives emotions enough space to register without being amplified or overridden by constant external presence. Internal richness mistaken for disengagement. People who prefer silence are often assumed to be disengaged, distant, or unresponsive. In reality, much of their attention is directed inward. Thoughts, associations, and emotional nuances continue unfolding even when nothing is being expressed. In noisy environments, this inner richness becomes harder to access. Attention is pulled outward repeatedly, interrupting internal continuity. Silence restores access to that inner depth where meaning forms quietly. What appears as passivity is often absorption. The absence of sound does not signal emptiness. It signals that attention has returned to a place others rarely look. Silence as a space for psychological alignment. Silence allows different parts of the self to come back into alignment. Thoughts slow enough to match emotional pace. The body releases tension it did not know it was holding. Awareness becomes less divided. In this state, decisions feel clearer not because answers appear, but because internal signals stop competing. There is less urgency to respond and more capacity to notice what feels congruent. Silence is not an absence of life. It is the environment where inner systems synchronize without interruption. Preferring silence over noise is not a rejection of energy, people, or engagement. It reflects a system that functions best with fewer external demands and more internal continuity. Quiet becomes the medium through which clarity, emotional balance, and self-alignment naturally emerge. When understood this way, silence is no longer a lack. It is a form of psychological precision, choosing coherence over constant stimulation.